Hallelujah! Shalom family! Love to the 12 tribes of Yasharal scattered abroad. Welcome! In this video, I want to talk about the Netflix film Leave the World Behind. This film depicts what happens to two families that end up together when the stuff hits the fan in America. In particular, I want to talk about the imagery and symbolism in this movie in regards to American slavery. Spoiler alert, I'm going to talk about plot points and events that occur in this film, so if you have not seen it, be forewarned. In this film, we have a family that rents a house for the weekend, and this house is located in Point Comfort. During their vacation, the family visits the beach, and while they're enjoying the beach, an oil tanker beaches, and we see that the name of the oil tanker is White Lion. Now, when the Father Clay goes to town to see if he can find any help, he looks through the radio stations and we see this image of 1619 on the radio. In late August 1619, 20 to 30 enslaved Africans landed at Point Comfort, today's Fort Monroe in Hampton, Virginia, aboard the English privateer ship White Lion. A year before the arrival of the Mayflower in New England, though the African captives were sold as indentured servants, the event is regarded as the start of African slavery in the colonial history of the United States. When the family goes to the beach, we see this sign, "Welcome to Charleston Harbor." Charleston was North America's largest transatlantic slave trade port of entry. Nearly 150,000 kidnapped Africans, over 40% of all enslaved Africans trafficked to North America, arrived through Charleston Harbor. As a result, many so-called Black Americans today can identify at least one ancestor who was trafficked through Charleston. While this family is at the beach, the son, Archie, receives a message from his girlfriend and a location of Sag Harbor. During colonial times, the northwest of East Hampton Village was the free Black and Native Americans enclave during the Indian path to Sag Harbor. So the movie is divided into 5 parts. The first part is called The House. Now, when we go to the Torah and the Tanakh, we see that Egypt is called the house of bondage. At the beginning of the film, on the way to the rented property, the family is on the road, and we see this sign. We see Fort Mose Road, and then exit Point Comfort. So remember, Point Comfort is where the white lion landed and brought the enslaved so-called Africans to the Americas. It's very interesting that it diverts from Fort Mose Road. So Mose, short for Moses, and we understand that the Torah of Yahuwah was given by the hand of Musha or Moses. So when we divert from the Torah, we exit to Point Comfort. And again, many times disobeying the laws, commandments, and statutes of Yah can be very comfortable in this world. However, that comfort leads us to slavery. Devarim, or Deuteronomy chapter 28. But it shall come to pass, if you will not hearken unto the voice of Yahuwah Alaik, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command you this day, that all these curses shall come upon you and overtake you. And Yahuwah shall bring you into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spoke unto you, you shall see it no more again. And there you shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Slavery is the result of Israelites not obeying the Torah of the Most High Yah. And when it says no man shall buy you, it's referring to the law of redemption, the right of the kinsman redeemer, meaning that no man shall redeem you out of slavery. Do me a huge favor and smash the like button. And also consider subscribing. It really helps me to grow the channel. And the more the channel grows, the more we all can spread the word. So let's look what Yah spoke to the kings of Yehuda that were rebelling against his word. Yirmiyahu, or Jeremiah chapter 22. Woe unto him that builds his house by unrighteousness, and his chambers by wrong, that uses his neighbor's service without wages, and gives him not for his work, and says, I will build me a wide house and large chambers, and cuts him out windows, and it is sealed with cedar, and painted with vermilion. Shall you reign because you closet yourself in cedar? Did not your father eat and drink, and do judgment and justice, and then it was well with him? So this is what Yah is speaking to the king of Yehuda who was not doing the will of Yah. So if he said this to the king of the house of Yehuda, how about these foreigners that built America using their neighbor's service and give him not for his work? He judged the cause of the poor and needy, talking about the righteous king. Then it was well with him. Was not this to know me, says Yahuwah? But your eyes and your heart are not but for your covetousness, and for to shed innocent blood, and for oppression, and for violence to do it. So when we look at the history of the United States of America, was it built for the cause of the poor and needy, for righteousness? Or was it built for covetousness, shedding innocent blood, oppressing the poor, and doing it by violence? And when this family comes into the rented property, and we have the wife Amanda going about the house, and while she's touring through the house, admiring its beauty, in the background you hear the soundtrack, Never Gonna Let You Go by Blackstreet. So what is the idea being presented here? She's coveting the house that belongs to another family. Later that evening, you have the couple, the husband and the wife, Clay and Amanda, playing Jenga. Jenga is a key Swahili word which means to build. And we know that the United States of America and its wealth was built on slave labor. While they're playing, the husband Clay mentions about one of his students who has published a work named Maria Miller. Maria W. Stewart, born Maria Miller, was an American teacher, journalist, abolitionist, and lecturer known for her role in the anti-slavery and women's rights movements in the United States. The first known American woman to speak to a mixed audience of men and women, white and black. She was also the first so-called African American woman to make public lectures, as well as to lecture about women's rights and make a public speech opposing slavery. Interrupting the game of Jenga, we have the owners of the house, the so-called African American family, George and Ruth Scott, father and daughter, appearing in the evening, and you have this back and forth between the colonizer couple, Clay and Amanda, with the owner, George Scott. And when the owners come into the house, you see that the Jenga tower falls. So what happens when the owners return to the house that was stolen from them? So you have two ideas here. What happens to the United States of America when the Israelites repatriate back to their homeland? We built up the lands of our diaspora. What happens when we leave these various lands of the diaspora, including the United States, and we return back to our homeland? And again, what will happen when we receive reparations for what we and our ancestors have done in these lands of diaspora? Will it not bankrupt these foreign lands and cause systematic collapse? So you have this colonizer family sleeping in the bedroom, and then you have the Israelite family, George and his daughter Ruth, sleeping in the basement. And again, you can see the image behind the bed of the notion, and it kind of is reminiscent of what happened on those slave ships. You had the colonizers on the top, and you had the enslaved in the dungeon, in the basements, in the pits of the ships. When the Scots show up and introduce themselves as the owners of the house, one of the questions that Amanda, the wife of the colonizer family, asked George, how can you prove that this house belongs to you? Where are your pictures? Later on, we find out that in the locked rooms, that's where they keep their private pictures. Ruth, the daughter, enters one of these locked rooms that is not accessible to the guests, and we see in this locked room the family history of the Scots, going back to colonial times. We see the picture of the ships. Isn't this also what we experience when we learn American history in the American school system? It's when you go outside the system and research on your own that you find the so-called African American history, the Israelite history on which the American wealth and system has been built. In their search to find out what is going on when the stuff hits the fan and the communication system is down, George goes to visit the neighbors, the Huxleys. So let's look at a quote from Aldous Huxley from Brave New World. A really efficient totalitarian state would be one in which the all-powerful executive of political bosses and their army of managers control a population of slaves who do not have to be coerced because they love their servitude. When the husband of the colonizer family, Clay, tries to go to town to get information and help, we see that he passes by a road sign that reads, Taney Farms. So let's look at the history of Roger Taney. Taney, a deeply religious Roman Catholic, considered slavery an evil. He had freed the slaves he had inherited before he came to the Supreme Court. However, Chief Justice Roger Taney delivered this opinion in the Dred Scott case, that slaves were not citizens of the United States and could not sue in federal courts. Alright, so this was the decision of Judge Roger Taney in the Dred Scott decision. Remember, the so-called African American family, their family name is Scott. George and Ruth Scott, just like Dred Scott. At the end of the film, we find out that one of the families built a very high-tech bunker in their house. And this was the Thorne family. So let's look at J. Albert Thorne, who was a Back to Africanist. J. Albert Thorne had similar views to Marcus Garvey in the Back to Africa movement. However, J. Albert Thorne predates Marcus Garvey. We have J. Albert Thorne in the 1860s, and he advocated so-called African Americans to return to Africa. So we see that the daughter of the colonizer family, Rose, found the underground bunker in the Thorne's house. So what is this saying to us? Is it a safe place to go back to Africa? Is that our bunker? Is that our safe place for those of us of the diaspora of Yasharal to return to the continent of Africa? Towards the end of the film, we have George revealing some information that was given to him about a 3-stage plan to topple a country's government from within. And the 3rd stage, the final stage, was civil war. Now, the United States has experienced civil war. And the main issue, one of the main issues of that civil war, was the question of slavery. So if stuff hits the fan and the possibility of civil war in the United States arises again, what possibly could be the cause of that? I think the release of this movie and other movies at this time is very interesting. We had the release of Leave the World Behind in the winter of 2023. And now we have a film entitled Civil War scheduled to be released spring 2024. And in the film Civil War, it depicts what may happen if civil war breaks out in the United States. Mark chapter 3. And he called them unto him, and said unto them in parables, How can Hashatan cast out Hashatan? And if a kingdom be divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house be divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And if Hashatan rise up against himself and be divided, he cannot stand, but has an end. No man can enter into a strong man's house and spoil his goods, except he will first bind the strong man, and then he will spoil his house. So if the Western world, including the United States of America and the lands of our diaspora, are the daughter of Babylon, the house of Hashatan, if civil war breaks out, if that house is divided against itself, that means the power of that kingdom is broken. So are we ready? Are we ready for the collapse? Are we ready for the system failure? Are we ready to leave the world behind? I thought the film was very interesting and thought-provoking. What did you think about the film? Did you find any other symbols or metaphors? Leave a comment below. Let's be prepared. Shalom, family. Fear Elohim and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Bind up the testimony, seal the Torah among my disciples. Shalom, family. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to click the subscribe button. Like, comment, and share.